All right, welcome. We are, if you can believe it, we're scrolling all the way down. We are finally in week 14. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about just the belt exam, what to expect. We'll do a little bit of a review, also kind of open up the time for and kind of like the thought process of Wednesday is our algo, but it's also a review session as well. So I have a little bit of an algo. If we don't have anything we need reviewing right before the belt exam. But if we need to review, we can absolutely do that. That's not a problem. So these 2 days are kind of reserved for that. Today I'm going to be going over everything that you should expect from the belt exam, how it's going to work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm actually going to walk you through the entire sort of grading sheet that I'm going to use. So that way I'm a big advocate of like no secrets, no surprises. It's not going to confuse you. I'm not going to show you the exam, but that sort of same thing of like, there's not going to be any secrets with this. So that's what we're going to do today. We've already associated logged in users and classes, users and templates. We've already done all that. So again, today we're just walking through the kind of expectations, the rubric, and then walking again through some code at the end. And then if there's anything you guys need prior or after that, then we can continue to talk. And then be thinking if you have questions on Wednesday, I do have an algorithm that we can do. But if you guys have questions, that takes precedence over that. Before we get started, just as a reminder, you have a discussion question and you have a core assignment of recipes. Now, before you take the exam, I would really encourage you to do recipes. Recipes is an assignment that mirrors the exam in quite a way, where it's got a login and registration. It's kind of our belt reviewer, belt prep, where you're going to have something like this. And this is very similar to what the exam will look like. It'll be like the same wireframe. So physically it'll look the same. I mean, we use the same company called Balsamiq that makes all of our wireframes. So it'll physically look the same. The material obviously is not, but you're going to have some sort of register and login. Now, as a reminder, you can come with a fully functioning register and login. That's a-okay. Make sure you have validations. Make sure you use bcrypt. Now, a thing to remember is, when we're doing register and login, that also means we're going to have a user class. Again, you can come with that sort of pre-built out of the box. Make sure your database works. You've got a user class and a working login and registration. Out of the box, you guys can have that. Things to kind of keep in mind, though, is these fields might be different. So this one says first name, last name, email, password, confirm password. It might say first name, middle name, last name. It might say first or full name, age, email, password. And so just be aware of that, and even practice, if you will, saying, okay, if it was age instead of last name, what are all the different pieces I'm going to need to change so that this works appropriately, both in your ERD. So you're going to have to go back through in your database, do your ERD. You're going to have to go in your model and change your controller and change your queries. So you're going to have to go change everything accordingly if these are different. If they're not different, then great. You don't have to worry about it. But if they are, just keep that in mind. You can come with the fully functioning stuff, but you just might have to kind of change it. I'm going to put this a little bit higher so that way you guys can see. And you guys are able to see my login page, right? My Coding Dojo
Yes,
page?
sir.
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, it looks
Perfect.
good.
Thank you. This is what it'll look like. And so what it'll do is we'll have these like little kind of like sticky notes, if you will, that just kind of tell you the things to expect. And so first name and last name must be at least 2 characters. Cool, that's your validation. Email must have a valid email format. Remember, we use regex for that. So this is saying, hey, use regex to have an email format. I shouldn't be able to go in and just put anything and then accept it, just like a string needs to be there. Password and confirm password must match. Okay, so we've done that. Again, that's just in, maybe I'll kind of hop back and forth. But if we go to our validator in my user, right, we just have this. First off, we have this regex. It's email regex that can be found at the top here. And this is straight from the platform. We also did make a password. As you can see for recipes, that's not necessary. But we have this email regex. And so this handles that validation. First name and last name are less than 2. That's great. These pass. This must be that. Again, you don't need a password regex for this, but then we also say, hey, if the passwords don't match, then that's an issue. So we're crushing it. All of our validations are there. And then lastly, the user must not exist in the database. Well, if you guys remember, when we went to our controller, when somebody's trying to register, we first check and say, is their stuff even valid? So we're not going to do anything if we're not going to ping our database at all. If it's not valid data, just go ahead and send it back. If it is valid, then we first want to check, and we use this user get by email. We pass in the email and we say, if there's a user, meaning something was sent back to us, then we say email already in use, please log in. And then we redirect. That takes care of this validation of user must not be in database. Cool. Login authentication is email must already exist in the database. That makes sense because we're going to be pulling that email when we go to login. I'll shut this. And if there's anything you guys, because this is sort of the belt review, if there's anything you guys need me to pause on or further explain, please, please, please just stop, come off mute and say, hey, can you explain this a little bit more? Again, we're checking if it's valid. You don't need necessarily a validator for login. It's not bad to have, but if you don't have this, I'm not going to like throw a fit. Because if our user puts in a bad email address, then it doesn't matter. We're just going to send back invalid email. Technically, it's better to have a validator because we're not pinging our database. But again, it's such a moot thing that's not that big of a deal. But email must that, and then database must be, or password must be checked against the hashed password in the database. And we are doing that. Not there, but we're doing that here, right? Where we're getting our email, we're passing it in to my get by email, same thing. If not user, meaning that doesn't exist in my database, let's redirect them back. And then we could have added a flash message that said email and or password are incorrect. Remember, we don't just say password's wrong or email's wrong. We say email and or password are incorrect. And then we have this if not bcrypt check password hash. We pass in the password that they're trying to give us. Or sorry, this is the password from my database because I called this user. If I called this unicorn, it'd be unicorn.password. And then we're checking whatever's in my database, that hash password with this one that they just passed in from my form. And bcrypt does the heavy lifting for us, and it checks this hash versus what this is, and then it tells us. This if not is basically, this is going to give us true or false. So if it's good to go, then it's true, then we're good to go. And if false, it's going to redirect us back. And again, we would have a flash message that says email and or password, email and or password are incorrect. And then lastly, we throw our user into session. That way we can track and see who's in session and who's not, or who's currently logged in, sorry. So we can kind of do different functionality. Cool. So that's our login page. Go ahead. Gregory, did you have something?
Really? Yeah. So does bcrypt automatically check the password against the hash password in the database, or do we have to do that manually?
So database, so if we're using bcrypt and the method of checked password hash, it's going to compare this hash password with whatever this would be hashed. So bcrypt handles all that. We don't have to pre-hash it. This is just on login though, right? It just to check, bcrypt will do it. When they are registering though is when we have to actually hash it by generate password hash right here. So the only time we generate a hash, again, bcrypt is still generating it, but the only time we generate it is when they're first saved. And then when we're comparing, bcrypt does all the heavy work and compares for us.
Got it. So essentially what that point is telling us to do is to make sure I use bcrypt.
Yes, yeah, you have to use bcrypt to hash. Yep. Good question. Any other questions on kind of register and login? Okay. Here we've got user must be logged in to view this page. The way we do that is, if you remember in my controller, I have this, oh, that's not my controller. This is my controller. I have this if not, or sorry, if I go to dashboard, if user ID not in session, then I redirect, right? And so what this does is, if I'm trying to go anywhere, so like my dashboard or anything that's not localhost 5000 or whatever my login page is, if I try to go anywhere, but my user ID is not in session, the only ways that we will create this session key is always in my, if they're logging in or if they just registered, right? And so it's saying, hey, if you haven't done that, we know that the way that you will get your session or cookie, right, of user ID is if you've registered or you logged in. So if you haven't done that and you try to go to our page, it's first going to check and say, hey, are you logged in? If you're not, it's going to redirect you back to the login page. If you are, then go ahead and send us to this HTML. Cool. Now, this is something that we did in office hour, Tenzin and I, but only show edit and delete links if the recipe was created by the user logged in. Now, what this is going to look like is in our HTML, we can have some information. So let's say, let me just go ahead and spin this up real fast. Okay. If I go here to localhost 5000, and I see. Perfect. If I want to, like, I show all users and see how we have, show, edit, and delete on all of these. Maybe we'll just kind of do this here and you can kind of get the idea. If I want to go into this, and this is my user/all, so let's go to my controller and find user/all. User/all. What this is doing is it's saying users is users. So I have my get all right here. And so what this is this is a method that's going to get all of my values and it's going to go to my all users HTML. So let's say that I wanted to create it to where whoever's logged in, they can edit and delete their profile, but they can't delete anybody else's. Well, what I can do is I can go to my HTML and we're iterating through, right? And I've got this user.first name, user.last name, user.email. I have access to my entire user instance. And I know that because if I see this get all, I'm selecting all, I'm creating a list of users, and I'm appending the class instance of users. So I have my entire class instance of each value, and I'm returning that. So all users is, in this case, when I'm saying users, this is just a list of my user instances, right? And so if it's a list of my user instances, it means it has access to all of this. And so what is a way, do you think, that I can identify, knowing just what we've talked about at the very beginning and things that we're saving and storing, what's a way that I can identify who's logged in compared to basically these different values? Anybody have any ideas?
Wouldn't we have access to their ID from their
We
login?
would. Exactly. And so what I can do is I can, I'm just gonna make this like this, just gonna make it a little bit easier to read. Is I can do something like this. So maybe I want to show all that information. I want to be able to show all, right? Like I want to be able to show all, but only if they're logged in can they edit and delete. So what I can do is I can go in my HTML and I can say bracket, and then I do my if, and then do double. And I can say if I've got access to my, because I'm iterating through my users, I could say user.id equals session of, and then what did I call it? In here, I called it user underscore ID. User underscore ID. Then I want to show. So if the user ID of that instance matches whoever's logged in. So basically, if whoever's logged in is looking at their own profile, then I want to show edit and delete. And then I just come here and I say end if. And so now I'm logged in as Becky Cal. I refresh. Only Becky Cal sees edit and delete. So again, just to repeat, I knew that I had access to my list of users. And I'm saying, hey, if the user ID of this instance or of this row matches whoever's in session, so whoever's logged in, so we know that it's their profile, then I want to show edit and delete. Now you could sort of think about it as well, to where if I had all movies and I only wanted to show edit and delete for the movies that whoever's logged in, they can only edit and delete their own movies. It's sort of the same thing, right? Instead, I would just say if, oh, there is no user ID here. I know my actual instance has it, but if the user ID equals, so if this user underscore ID equals session, so it'd probably be like movie dot user ID, user underscore ID equals session of user underscore ID, then I know that whoever's logged in also created this movie, therefore they should be able to edit it. Does that make sense? So just by doing this, we can hide HTML and only give conditions on if we want to show it or not, i.e. if they're logged in or if that person's logged in, then show it. But if I go here, let's say I go to log out and I log in with another one. Then I get an error. It's because that was an issue because prior to us using bcrypt, I created this. And so if we were to, let's just kind of look at that real quick. Oh, I don't want the shell. Just to kind of show you that error. Okay, so if I come here, then you see that my C@C had this password. But what I was trying to do is, like if I try it again, I'll just show you the error. This is saying invalid salt, right? Because we're trying to use this check password hash and we're trying to run that through and basically decrypt my password from a bcrypt side. But if you can tell here, I didn't have bcrypt run that. So bcrypt's trying to say, hey, I don't know what you want me to do here, right? This isn't, I didn't hash this, or this isn't hashed originally by me. So therefore I don't know how to compare these two because I'm going to try to compare the hash. Whereas these two, I can do it. Does that make sense? Just put a 1 in the chat if that makes a lot of sense. Put a 0 if it does not.
Consent so far, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Kobe. Cool. So that was an error. So let's go. We'll try r at c.com. And then we'll try. And we can see, okay, so that worked. And if I show all users now, Randy shows edit and delete, not Becky. So it's just a way that we can, again, it's just going to check whoever's in session with our row. And then that way we can kind of make data look well.
Is there any sort of way you could retroactively change that?
What do you
Or
mean, sorry?
Charlie?
Yeah,
the
great
password hash.
question. You could, I mean, the short way would be to like just write my update. Like to go to like update it and it should run that through a hash. Well, no, because you wouldn't update the past. Well, you could. Great question, Gregory. So I was just thinking real fast. What you could do is in your controllers, if you have like an update, and you're passing here, we would, and this is an error on my part, we would want to do the same, where we would want to take this. And let's say that we are updating our user. I would want to do this, and then you would say PW hash. And so could I log in as Charlie? No, but maybe I have like an admin that has access to all of them. Like, so what I could say, and let's kind of just, this is maybe getting too in the weeds, but we're here. So Will Calhoun has an ID of 1. So maybe let's say that I wanted to be admin here. So what we could say is, if you're Will, you can see everybody's. And if not, you're only restricted to yourself, right? So in my HTML, I could say that, or user dot ID. Yeah, or and this is like not the best security, but for what you're doing, it would be just fine. So I'm saying, hey, if it matches whoever's logged in, or if whoever's logged in, if their ID is 1, which is Will Calhoun, then we're kind of saying that they're an admin, right? And typically what you would have is if you were going to build in some admin functionality in your user, you might have some, is admin, or, some like a list of kind of different things that they can have. And so you would check that and say, if user dot permissions contains admin, then you show it, that kind of thing. But this is a really simple workaround to where if I come back and I log out, it's not going to be a simple workaround because it's going to run into the same issue, right? We're running the same issue. And so honestly, you would just an easy thing is I would just honestly probably delete these. Or else you could go in and update that if you wanted to, but you would then have to change your code. And so maybe you would allow for a second for me to log in without it. And then I could go in and update myself and then change it back. So I can log in. What I would do, if I went to user login, I would check that. I would hang out right here. And then I could just say if not cool. So now what this does is it goes in and this is just a quick bypass, right? To where now when I log in and I refresh, if I look here, capital password, I could say w@c.com. Show all users, because now I'm one, I can edit everybody's. So I could edit. And then now in my update, let's make sure that when I say update and I run that, it's going to generate a password hash. It's going to pass that. And then it updates. So let's try this. Ooh, we get an error. Firm password. Ah. So does anybody know what this issue is saying?
Is it saying that the confirmed password doesn't match the stored password?
That's exactly what it's saying. But if you notice, we added confirmed password after I created this form. And so what you could do is you could just go to edit user, and then we could just actually pass in. This would be a better use. And then we say confirm password, because we want to make sure that we confirm it. It's good to go. It's always a good thing because people fat finger it. And so that's really why. Or else you have to go in and then change it again. So now we refresh. Cool. So if I say cool. So if I come here and I refresh. Okay. So now my password's hashed. And then I could go in. I know that this was kind of a very long-winded way. But you asked a great question, Gregory. Now I could go in and edit everybody's, change my login back to where it has to be a certain
Yeah, thank you for
users.
showing it because I was just wondering
Mhm.
because of the ID issue.
Yeah.
You know, if you have to create a whole new user and start all over again.
Yeah. So you don't have to. I mean, this is like a long way. If you don't want to create a new user, then this would be a long way that you would have to go through. And so now, again, I can refresh. Go
It's good to know.
here.
Thank you.
And then because I have that admin, you can go in and I can edit the other three that need it and change their password to. And I would change that to edit user. But yeah, and then you can go in and it's kind of the very long way of changing them. And then moving forward, you should be good to go. But you should have it hashed out of the box. Okay. Great. Yeah, of course. So that's kind of how, I mean, we're handling this delete page or delete link, removes, edit goes. Great. Redirect to show error messages. We've showed, kind of how to do that as well. User must be logged in to see this page. That's going to be sort of persistent throughout. So always check if the user's logged in. All fields are required. And name and description and instructions must be at least 3 characters. So this is basically just additional validations And then the big part of what will, can you guys still hear me? Sorry, my phone.
You're all good.
Okay, cool.
Yes, we do.
Great. Sorry, it was just kind of silent, and my headphones sometimes when if somebody's calling me, it'll flick over and then I can't hear you, and it's a whole pain. But all these validations are to kind of help with this recipe. In our case, it was movies. And then the big thing is that just kind of following after creation, redirect to the dashboard or redirect back. Sometimes what I see is it just kind of sits there and it's either on the same page or it's not really following the process. So it's saying, okay, I want to redirect here or go here. So just make sure that you're kind of following that. They have arrows, like when you click edit, this should be the edit page that comes up. When you click view recipe, this should be the page that comes up, posted by Kai. You know, here's all of this information, date made, all that good stuff. So follow that. If it's not like to a T, right? If you call this like all recipes /ID, I'm not going to freak out about that. We do want to do RESTful routing. So we want to make sure it's like recipe. See, this is even, yeah. So recipes new, recipes two, recipes, localhost 5000. So we want to try to do RESTful routing. That's how APIs are set up, but that's how typically when we're building these sort of web servers, that's how we follow that. So please just be cautious of that. But again, if you said all recipes /edit/for, all recipes to, all recipes new, I don't care about that. Also, just as a reminder, this is all I care about look wise. Like even if you look at this is fine. You don't need CSS other than this. Now, if you had it to where maybe you didn't put everything in a table or it looked really bad, or your forms are kind of big for me, to where like it's super easy to make it look like this. If you just have a form and they're kind of all different sizes or they're all on one line, there is a portion, and I'm going to go through kind of what I'm going to grade you on in this, that basically says, does it match? And that's a portion where I will basically say, hey, this doesn't match. This is no good. So you're going to lose points on that. But it's got to be pretty egregious and not fun to look at for me to do that. But again, you don't need colors. You don't need a background. You don't need any of that, because we're going to just give you something that looks like this, but this background, these colors. So don't focus on those. Just try to get your data on there. That's the most important thing. Are you getting the data there? I care less about how it looks. I care more about the functionality. Then if the functionality works well, work on, is it uniform? Is it in a row? Is it whatever? Because you can lose way more points on lacking functionality. And it's not that many points, even if I'm like, this is the ugliest thing I've ever seen, which I won't, because I'm sure you guys are going to crush it. But even if that was the case, you could still pass, right? It's just a moot or a minute portion of that. So kind of my encouragement would be to do recipes, at least try it, get a feel for it before starting the exam. So let's talk about what will that look like. On Friday, the exam window opens. And so I will check to make sure, and there's a couple things of criteria that you need to have followed in order for this, for you to even be what we call like eligible for the exam. You have to have a certain percentage of I believe it's 90%. So I think you can only be missing one assignment, which is typically recipes. But again, try to do that. You can only be missing up to one assignment. So you have to be at that 90% of core assignments complete. So on Friday, what's going to happen is I'm going to go in and I'm going to check everybody's assignments. If you're at 90%, then I will say, hey, great job. And I'm going to send you a really long email. Email is just going to have some do's and don'ts. It's not super long, but just like do's and don'ts of the exam, things to think about. Tips and tricks, like, if you're really stuck on a problem, and this is my encouragement, really give it 20 minutes. And if you can't figure it out, get up and go for a walk, go get a glass of water, go do something that is not coding, and then come back to it with fresh eyes, because that's going to help. So I'll give some of my favorite like coding music, things to listen to. But I will send you that on Friday. Now, And that's usually around like 9 a.m. to noon Pacific time. If it is noon, and I will put in Discord, hey, emails have been sent out, but let's hypothetically say that you are 2 assignments behind, right? And you don't qualify for it. And you'll know, like, and I'll on Wednesday give you the criteria, even kind of more built out. But let's say that you're 2 assignments behind. I am not going to reach out to you on Friday and say, hey, did you get them done? So I can get you this exam code. That'll be your job to reach out to me. Just shoot me an email and say, hey, I did this. Can I get an exam code? We can also, or TAs also are going to be allowed to give you an exam code. So if I am off, let's say I'm off at 5 p.m. PST on Friday. If it's past that time, let's say it's 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is 6 p.m. our time. If I'm off, feel free, and the TAs are still on, feel free to shoot them a message in Discord and just ask, for an exam code. TAs will have that for you. So what does that mean? I'm going to give you a code that when you go to the platform, you will have a take exams right here. You're going to come here and you're going to enter your exam code. Now, let me give you some caution. The minute you enter your exam code and press unlock, this is not an exam code, but once you do that, your 24-hour timer starts. You have 24 hours from when you unlock the exam to fully turn it in. So if you're like, oh, it's Friday night, it's late, I'm going to work on this Sunday, I have all day of reserve, but I just want to peek at what the exam looks like, I would encourage you, don't do that. Don't do it until you have ample time to sit down and actually work on it, because your timer starts. Now you have 24 hours from when you start the exam, and it's going to give you, once this unlocks, it's going to take you to a page that's honestly going to look fairly similar to this. And it's going to have your wireframe. It'll have everything you need. It's not going to have like a video, but it'll have a wireframe. It'll lay out what you need to do for each kind of criteria. And so that, again, that starts your 24 hours. You have 24 hours from when you unlock it to submit the exam. Now, submitting the exam consists of a few things. It's your exam zipped up. And so you're going to put this on the platform. Inside of your exam, I need you to send me your MWB file. Remember, that is when we have our, when we have these guys right here. And I say database, before I say Ford Engineer, I want to file save, model as. And this is what our MWB file is. I need that because then I take that file and I open it up and I Ford Engineer it so I have that database correctly. So if you called it, let's say in your database, you called it F name and not first underscore name or first name with no space, no underscore. I'm not going to keep recreating your database for everybody. And so make sure you do that MWB file. If you are on a Mac and you cannot do that, then shoot me an email. And shoot me an email after you submit, and then shoot me an email with a kind of a layout of here's what I called all of my stuff. So like, for example, if we were doing this games, you would just say games table, ID, int, title, varchar 90, rating, varchar 45, platform, varchar 45, right? And so you would go through all of that for me, and then I will create your table, just because if you have Sonoma, it doesn't work with Sonoma. So there's like a technical barrier there. If you're on PC or on Linux and you can do it, just send me your MWB file. It makes my life a lot easier. That'll just be within your zipped file as well. So put that within your project. So just like, I think we even have just within here, you would have it. So how I have class overview, just kind of put your MWB and then zip up this whole thing and submit it. Cool. So exam window opens. Now, again, you have 24 hours to take the exam, but you don't have to take it on Friday. You don't have to take it on any day, right? Well, you have to take it if you want to pass the class, but the last day to take an exam is Tuesday, March 26th. So if you want to take it Friday, so this Friday, you're welcome to. And then usually I have a 24 to 48 hour turnaround during the business days. So if you do it on Tuesday, then usually by Wednesday or Thursday, I can get you a grade back. Obviously, if you do it on Friday, I'm not going to grade it until Monday. And then usually the first weekend's a little bit heavy. So that one's like a 48 to 72 hours, depending on how many people do it during the first weekend. But I'll try to get it as much as I can. If you pass, then I'm going to say congratulations. Here's a breakdown of everything I graded you on. And here's how you did. And so any comments I have of like, you could have cleaned this code up more, or hey, this looks great. I really enjoyed what you did here. So any sort of comments, and if I don't have comments, then it's just, hey, great job. But I try to be thorough with it. If you do need a retake, you have up to 3 chances to take this exam. Now, every time you take it, it's going to be a new exam. So it's not going to be the same exam over and over again. It's going to be a new exam, a new prompt, so new challenges with that. So there's different little pieces of each exam that's a little bit challenging and unique compared to the other exams. So that way we're not just giving you the same thing over and over. And so you get up to 3 chances. Again, I say up to 3 because if you wait until the 26th to take your first one, they're all due on the 27th. So, and my turnaround time is not fast enough for you to get all 3 in. So if you strategically take the first one this weekend, get a feel for it. And then if you need to retake, what I'll send you is again, a breakdown of how you did, what you missed points on, some pointers that I have, and then I'll also send you if it's finds where I'm like, you just missed a couple things, I can explain it, and I think you can go get it. Then I'll send you a belt exam code, a new one. So whenever you're ready, you can just take that second belt exam code. If it is something that I'm like, hey, there's some really big gaps, then I might ask you to meet with me if you can. I know that time is precious, so if you can't, then that's okay. But I might just be like, hey, maybe a meeting with me or a TA might help. But regardless, I'll still give you a new code. And then again, you have all this week and this weekend to take it. So let's say you take it on Thursday, you submit it Friday. I'll try to get it graded. That way you have the weekend. But if not, and I grade it Monday, you'd have until Tuesday to take your 3rd exam. So that's why I say up to 3. So you're not guaranteed 3. So if you take your first one on Tuesday, then you're just going to get 1. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're taking these. You don't have the nice thing is next week is just kind of extra stuff. And so what I'll probably talk about is us using APIs, because that is going to be the majority of your job is dealing with APIs. And so I want to make sure that we can really focus on, okay, let's utilize this API. And build out and kind of read documentation, because again, that's really what you're going to be building this stuff too, that this is super important. But like a lot of my day-to-day is just going through APIs and pinging different things. So we're going to talk about that next week. Cool. Any questions on that? Any questions on what we've talked about so far?
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah, great. Cool. The last thing I want to show you is really just what I'm going to grade you on. So here's the scale. I think I'm allowed to show you this. If I'm not, please don't tell anybody. But I'm going to just basically check you and say, I'm going to send you this anyway, so I think it'll be fine. Here's kind of the ways I'm going to grade you. And here's kind of the big base concepts. If you are, and let me go back, there's 3 types of exams you can get. If you do it within 24 hours, then you get what we call an orange belt. So that just means you did all the criteria, you did great, orange belt, that's awesome. Now, if you do it faster, so if you do it within 5 hours, same functionality as the orange belt, so there's not like additional functionality or anything, you just do it at an expedited rate, so within 5 hours instead of 24, then you get a red belt, just a little bit higher tier belt. Fun secret, employee or companies have no idea the tiers of our belts. So if this is like stressing you out, don't let it. As long as you pass, that's really the most important. Take your time, understand what you're doing. And then lastly, there is some extra sort of like stretch goals. If you remember back in some of the assignments, we had like sensei bonuses and ninja bonuses. In the sensei, there was like one or two that were a little bit more challenging. If you want to do those, you have to do all of the red belt, and then there will be some, again, stretch goals. And if you do those, and then it'll all be laid out for you, and it varies per exam, then you can qualify for a black belt. It still has to be within 5 hours. So you're within 5 hours, you're doing all the functionality of a red belt / orange belt, because they're the same, just one's at a different time. And you're doing additional functionality, a little bit more challenging stuff. Now, the black belt stuff might not be stuff that we covered in class, and that's sort of the goal, right? The black belt is to differentiate you or the students that can also self-teach, right? You have a really good grasp of CRUD, and then by self-teach, I mean more do research on Google. Like, okay, if I'm doing X, Y, or Z, how am I going to do that? An example might be, create a password regex, right? Create a regex to have a password that has a uppercase, a lowercase, and a number. That'd be a great example of like maybe a stretch. We haven't talked, we technically have talked about it. Most instructors don't talk about it, but that might be a stretch goal, right? Taking things that you're sort of familiar with and how do you mold it to something different? Or another way to think about it would be, let's say that we're getting all of our movies and I want to sort them in my table. I want to bring back my list or my query, but I want them sorted from descending or, I want them newest or oldest. How would we do that, right? It's in the platform technically, but that kind of stuff would be a black belt stuff. Cool. So what I'm also going to test you on is just this, and I'm going to give you either, proficient, mastery, almost there, struggling. So I'm going to give you something there. And so implements OOP classes as models, creating an ORM, object relational mapper. So uses constructors, instance attributes, and methods to appropriately represent, manipulate data, even if code composition may warrant some minor refactoring. So basically, are you able to do something like this, right? Do you have this sort of built out where you have all of these different queries, all these different class methods sort of built out? Are you using OOP, or is just everything in this file, right? Is everything in your controller? Or do you just have one server file? It's not even modularized. Creates instance attributes that appropriately represent database table relationships. So attributes are both present in one to n is just like one to many relationships. Data is manipulated through the application using object instances. This is a big one because remember, when we're dealing with this, we return a object instance, a class instance of my value. If you just give me back a, because results is going to be a list of dictionaries, right? If you just give me back and you don't create a class instance, but in this case, let's say you just gave me back results of 0 and you didn't create that as a class instance. So I don't even know if it's a user, right? It's just some data that I'm reading. Then I'm going to give you either one of these, right? 0.25 or 0. And so I'm going to keep going through, implement one of the primary one-to-many relationships where the wireframe is designed. So it is going to be a one-to-many. So you're not going to have to deal with many-to-many. That might cough be a more advanced feature, is dealing with a many-to-many. But for the base exam, it's just a one-to-many, which is what we've done. Proper use of SQL queries. Querying for data in a one-to-many relationship, if indicated, same thing. When we get our user with movies and we are dealing with this right here, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Can you, from my user, grab all my movies and create movie instances of them? So exactly what we do here. Cool. Great. Creates routes to process HTTP requests. Again, these are my routes for dealing with my controller. Do we have this? Do we follow the correct user/ID, user/ID/edit, user/ID/update? Do we follow that RESTful routing or do we not? And then if there's any errors, like if you aren't calling your ID correctly, or you're passing that in and it's not working, you get a 404 or 405, then I am going to say, or if it's not iterable, or I can't, if I get some sort of error, I'm trying to go to a page and it gives me an error, then I give you a 0 there. And then it's just showing data. Oh, sorry, went a little too fast there. Oh. Okay. Table or other data is dynamically rendered and displayed as indicated on the MVP. MVP is just the wireframe that we have, but may have one minor display element. So date formats, forgot one field on details page, displays owning users as indicated on wireframe. So if you have like a little tiny thing, then I might just give you proficient. If you're crushing it, then I'll give you a 0.75, and pre-populates form fields. If you remember, whenever we are editing, so like if I go to my edit and see how this information pre-populates, that's a mastery thing for us. Like, great, you did that. And remember the way we did that, just to kind of help a homie out, is we pass in that information and we just say value, right? We pass in the user that we're editing, value, and then we pass their information in that way. That's how we pre-populate. Cool. Retrieves and utilizes session ID. Again, that's to make sure that we have that. So if we were to go to our dashboard and we say, welcome, whoever's logged in, that's because we grab our session ID when we are registering or logging in. Cool. Import sets up Flask bcrypt. Go ahead. Was there a question? No. Okay. Sets up bcrypt properly. Great. We know how to do that. We've talked about it. All pattern validations for users upon creation, including regex. So yep. If we've got our email, we walked through that at the beginning of the class. Checks login credentials on dashboard page, redirecting as appropriate. So I'll try to just go to like /dashboard or /whatever if I'm not logged in and see if I'm allowed to do that or not. So if you don't, if I'm allowed to just navigate your site without logging in, then you'll be right here. Or if you don't have any, you don't save anything in session, I'll look at your code, then give you a 0. Basic data validations, again, validate string against criteria. We've handled that. We have a validator, has appropriate files and structures to implement this. Cool. Fully functioning CRUD according to the MVP, but maybe minor. So this is what I would say is like if we're looking at this is probably where I would, if you have some sort of issues, if it doesn't look great, if it's not, like CSS and overall presentation are excellent. So if it looks pretty bad, then I will probably give you in between here or there. Now, I'm just going to be blunt. If like your form looks bad, but that's going to make you fail the exam, and it's just because your form looked bad, because these are pretty big differentials, like I'm not going to fail you for that, right? Like do your best, but I'm not going to like fail you just because it doesn't look well if the functionality is right. So I keep that in mind too. Like, again, how much you've already missed. Not my goal is like my goal is for you to understand and know this, but my goal is also not to like nitpick and tell you, oh man, this is a bad color, I don't like it, something like that. So subjective. But make sure that you do have all the functionality, have everything that works there. So this is what I'm going to be going through. Really, as you can see, it's kind of just did the work requested to the level needed to be in the field, right? If you get proficient, that is great. That is awesome. If you get a couple of almost there, that's also not bad. That just means you might have a couple different issues. That's very normal. Like getting like a 9 or above is like pretty insane. Like especially the highest you can get, and this is kind of a good note, the highest you can get for a red belt or orange belt is a 9.5. That's the absolute max. So that's basically like 100%. If you get a black belt, then anything above a 9.5, that's or to 10, that's a black belt. So that means really without the black belt features, the maximum, the 100% value is 9.5. So if you get that, that's not that you missed anything. That just means that you got 100%. which means that you crushed everything here. Which I feel a lot of you guys are gonna do. So, are there any questions kind of on the rubric? Does this help for you guys to understand what to expect? Again, I try to be super transparent, not trying to trick you guys or not trying to do any of that.
The rubric looks pretty straightforward. Just quick question.
Yeah.
If hypothetically we do take and pass the test, can we use
Mhm.
subsequent attempts to go for a higher belt?
You can. Yep,
Good to
if you'd
know.
like to. If you'd like to. Now, I will say, if it's like you want to take it on the last Monday, and let's say that I get a flood of exams and it's people who are trying to pass, my grading priority is the people who haven't passed yet, or if it's their first one. So if you're like on your third one and you're wanting the 24-hour turnaround, but I get quite a few new exams, even if maybe you submitted it first, my priority is going to be that because you've already passed. This is just again an accolade, which I love that if people are trying to do that. But I just might be a little bit slower on the turnaround on those, but I'll do my best.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I have a question about the weight.
Yeah.
So let's say proficient, it says 8.39. Is that up to 8.39? Like, let's say if you get an 8.5.
Yeah,
Where would
it's
that put you?
between 8 point. So I think it's if you were proficient on everything, it equates to an 8.39. But you might be like mastery on one or the other. So it can go, it's really, so the great question. Anything below an 8 needs a retake. So it's considered a fail. So if you get a 7.5, that's considered a fail. An 8 or above, it's considered a pass. So an
Right.
8 to a 9.5, if it's within 24 hours, that's going to get you an orange belt. An 8 to a 9.5 within 5 hours, that's going to get you a red belt. And then if you do it within 5 hours and it's 9.5 or above, then and you have the extra functionality, so it'd be like 9.51, really, I guess it's like the real indicator. Then you can get a black belt. So it's anything above an 8. So
Understood.
that's where you can even,
Thank you.
yeah, of course, like you could go here and still you could get an almost there on this OOP and still pass because you'd have an 8.14, right?
Got it.
Yeah. Or if you get like maybe you get an almost there here, but then you get a 1 here and you crush that, then it kind of balances out and you're above that. So anything above an 8 is great.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Great question.
And well, where is this rubric again?
This is my rubric, so you won't get it, unfortunately. I will send out things to kind of kind of think about. I mean, you could also watch the exam or watch the video if you really wanted to kind of walk through it. But yeah, I can't give it out. I think I used to, and then I got in trouble once. But I still will show it to you guys because trying to be a homie.
Hi, Will. I have a question.
Yeah.
So for the assignments we had previously, so what assignments do we need to practice more on to prepare for the exam?
Yeah, great question. I would say this one right here, recipes, is going to be your best like bet. And I would encourage you guys really to try this one and do this one before even taking the exam. Now, you have to have up to, again, you have to have up to 90% of core assignments completed before you're even eligible to take the exam. So keep that in mind. Which is, I think, everything up to, but not including recipes. So if you're falling behind on exam or on assignments, please make sure that you're kind of doing those this week. And again, if you finish on Saturday, just try to ping a TA, put it in chat on Discord, and then TAs can get you a code. But I would say this recipes is going to be the most like an exam.
Okay.
An exam really at the heart of it is, can you implement CRUD functionality within 2 models within a one-to-many relationship? Can you implement CRUD? Can you create something? Can you create a user? Can you create, in our case, a movie? Or in this case, can you create a recipe and a user? Because you have to have a user, right? They have to register. That's you creating a user. Can you create a recipe? Can you associate the two by reading them? Can you update a recipe or a user? And can you delete? If you can do all of that, you will be just fine.
And all assignments has to be submitted by Friday, right?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so on Friday, what I'll do is Friday morning, I will check and say, hey, do you have, and like I'll check internally. And if you have it, then I'll send you out an email that says this is, here's your, congratulations, you qualify for the belt exam. Blah blah, and then I'll put in Discord, hey, I've sent out all emails. So if you feel like something's wrong, and you're supposed to receive it, feel free to ping me or email me is going to be the fastest. Email me, and then I can go back and look and make sure that I didn't miss anything. And if I did miss something, then I'll send it over to you. And again, if you maybe at the time I do it, you haven't finished your last assignment to qualify, but then by the end of the day you have, just message me again. As long as it's before 5 p.m. and I'll send you out in a code. And if it's after that, just ping Discord and then a TA can help you out.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, my
And
friends?
is this going to be our last lecture, or do we have another on Wednesday?
So I'm gonna have another one Wednesday that I'll let you guys kind of be the boss of. I have an algorithm that I think would be fun. It's a little bit challenging, but not as challenging as like when we did the cryptogram, any of that stuff. Much easier. So I have an algorithm ready, but I also want to reserve, I know it's belt week, so if people have questions, I want to be able to go over that. So if you have a question, come ready, come wearing, and we will focus on that. If we get to a point where nobody has questions, then we'll do an algorithm.
Sounds good. And do we have, like, once we finish this belt exam and the
Mhm.
whole program, do we have an access to all the resources?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
I mean, once we finish with this program, will we have access to all the homework assignments that we did in this program?
Oh yeah. So you keep access for, I believe, 6 months post graduation for anything. So like all of your Python stuff, all your assignments, all that stuff. And you'll move on to projects and algorithms at the end of this.
Mhm.
So in 2 weeks, you'll go to projects and algorithms.
Uh-huh.
And then once that, or I guess technically at the end of that 2 weeks, you'll go to projects and algorithms, and then you'll still have access to all your Python stuff in the same way you still have access to all your web fundamental stuff right now.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you have 4 weeks of that, and then you graduate, which is kind of crazy. So you guys are really, after this week, you're 6 weeks away from graduation.
Oh, that's quite fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that.
Thank you
Any
for
other
everything.
questions? Yeah, of course. My
Yeah.
pleasure. Happy to help. Any other questions, concerns?
Could I just ask you to go back to the rubric and scroll really slow?
Yep.
Good
Big-
man, thank you.
Of course.
Great question.
Hopefully you got all those screenshots. Just don't put them in
Right.
Discord.
Oh no, I'm just gonna watch the video back later.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
That
Yeah.
was way too fast for screenshots.
Oh, okay.
Hey, well, I got a question just in general.
Mhm.
So once we've gotten through this, we've learned how to build the front end, the back end, and how do we turn this into like a mobile app?
So that's a totally different color or different, that's a different horse, my friend. So mobile development is different than application or web development to an extent. They're kind of melding together at the moment, or they're beginning to, but there's other languages. So there's if you don't mind, I'll take a couple more questions just on this, and I'll stop the recording, and then we can talk. And I can
Yeah, I didn't mean like making a mobile app on your phone, but like when I've built websites before, like using GoDaddy, like it
Mhm.
makes it mobile friendly. Like you can look at it on your phone too or something.
Yeah, so Bootstrap allows that, and so you could, in theory, you would have to host this, and so you'd host it on GoDaddy, or you'd host it on AWS or Heroku or wherever. That way it can be accessed, because right
Okay.
now it's just on your local network. But if you use Bootstrap, it allows you to kind of make it dynamic. You'd have to change a couple things. So you'd have to basically, like where we're dealing with containers, you would say, you set the functionality of, okay, if the viewport is reading at 550 pixels, we're going to assume that that's a phone. Okay, this is how I want you to show it. So you kind of have to set that up. But I mean, out of the box, Bootstrap can kind of help with that. The reason I was saying that is we can set up our back end as Python, and then our front end could be like React Native. And that's just a library of JavaScript, but that allows you to be on both your Android and iPhone. So that's just language you'd have to add in if you wanted like a true mobile experience. If not, then with CSS or with Bootstrap, you can just make it dynamic.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
But it would have to be hosted. That's just the one thing.
So, yeah, so it has to live somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, because I made it my first mistake when I first when I first started to learn how to code is like, I created something like this and I sent it to my friend and I was like, look at look at the website I made. It was like localhost 5000. They're like, yeah, I had no idea. Like that doesn't do anything. I was like, I didn't know. So yeah, it has to be hosted somewhere.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other
Hey, Will.
questions on these? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using Sonoma.
Uh-huh.
So if I send ERD like MWP,
Mhm.
is that okay? Like
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
I'll I'll
you can
write
just
the
send-
email also.
Yeah, well, if you are using Sonoma, but you can create an MWB, then that's fine. That works just fine. Because I have a Windows. But if you can't create an MWB, I know that you use your brother's. If you can't
Yeah.
create an MWB, then that's when I need the email, and then I'll do it.
Okay. Can I like still make that password as a root in the PyMySQL? Where we used to put like
Yeah. Well, you'll have your. I'll just go into your config file. That's kind of part of my when I'm grading is I go in and then I just change it to whatever mine is. So even if you have your users, if you change your username or password, I just go in and change it to mine. So
okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
so great question. Any other questions? Okay. Well, that's all I have. I know we're 9 minutes over, but just want to make sure everybody got their questions answered. When it comes to the exam, we're almost there, friends.
Oh man, you know what? I thought I was on time. I didn't realize the time zone changed.
Yeah.
Damn. I was like,
Oh,
what are they talking
no.
about?
I'm sorry, Graylin. Yeah, the time zone changed.
Oh man.
Oh man, that's a bummer.
Um,
If you stay for a second, I'll just kind of tell you what I walked through. I'm going to stop the recording though.
All right.
I'm happy to tell you. Okay. Any other questions before I stop the recording? Okay.